What? Where's my coffee? There's my coffee. Yeah, flavor country. All right, so here's another installment of the series. You want to get like me. Don't know why you'd want to do that. Are you sure you want to do this? But anyway, so we're going to be doing some trim cap on this. I know you sent this over. Right. So, and you know who I'm talking to. But anyway, so for those of you watching along, so we got to be able to change this over to in real life. So I'm showing you what I'm going to have to do to get this trim capable. What I want you to be able to realize is like what to look for, because if you're going to be wearing two hats, you're the guy who does this, you're the graphics guy, sure. So you go ahead and make this, and this is perfectly fine for permit drawings and whatnot. But then when you go to actually trim cap this, things like this is not going to work. And you have what are called stress risers here, things that could break, especially when it's in acrylic mode and things like that. So I'll give you what to look out for. That way, both you can make these decisions before it comes to me. And it's not that I'm like, oh, I'm too busy to do this. But honestly, these are more up your alley as far as graphics department, as far as making these choices for design, but also being able to massage some nodes here and there, which will save me a lot of time. You know, I can still go over it and make sure things are cool. But like stuff like this, I would like you to be able to recognize that and not even send it out. But like I said, you are going to have to switch your hat, and then you'll have to yell at yourself for sending yourself your own. Yeah, anyway, you know what I'm saying. So let's get after it. So I understand, cool. We did a outline on this, a contour, and this is just kind of what shows up. And I saw what you did before out here. I didn't bring that over, but yeah, to link them all together is no good. However, this right here leaves, again, what my boy Ernie calls a stress riser. So when you look at those, like, I don't know, those kind of cool CAD programs where they show you stress. Let's just say that blue is no stress, and then it starts to go orange and red, and then it turns white hot where it wants to break. So these here would be pretty much blue, but then right here would be where it turns red, because if you were to accidentally lift Enjoy by itself, and this is in acrylic in real life, this will just want to snap right there. So we don't want to set that up. Also, you got to also put on your fabrication hat. And when we go to trim cap this, but not only that, but when we go to do return material around this, we can't be this detailed or, you know, things like these little guys here. So I'll show you what you kind of have to do is find that happy medium. And that brings to me a joke about like architects versus engineers. I could pull it. I'm just going to grab what shows up on Google. Yeah, so this is just Google Images, which is kind of funny. So yeah, like this right here, this is an architect versus an engineer. Architect's like, oh, isn't that pretty and all that cool? We can do that. And engineer's like, nah, dog. That all has to be supported. That all has to be, you know, this kind of funny thing too. Yeah, I saw this. It's like a concept sketch, you know, whatever. But then when the actual engineer's like, nah, dude, it just blocks, dude, because that's going to be good for earthquakes and stuff. So it's one thing to be the design guy, being able to come up with cool stuff and just leave this kind of stuff. But when it comes to fabrication, following this around with a piece of 050 aluminum, tacking it, and then creating that kind of, you know, whatever, it's just pain in the booty. So I already kind of played with this a little bit. Ultimately, the engineer in me would want this to just be straight across, but I understand that that's going to look funk. So a happy medium, I kind of already fooled with it, would be kind of like that. So if we bring that to the front there, so you can see where it gives the idea that, yeah, the Y's still drop down. Doing a straight across would be, that's the ultimate, like, yeah, let's just do it that way. That's the safety engineer, easy way to do it, and a little lazy. But so I understand there's, you know, a little bit of a compromise there. So if that's acceptable, and again, this is something that, you know, you as a designer can wear both hats, you know, split, you know, Two-Face from Batman. You know, you could actually be like the engineer saying, I just want to make this, you know, the engineer just wants to make a square, right? There you go. That's good. Can we just do that? That'd be great. And the fabricator, like the square is easier. Obviously not. So you as Two-Face and Batman, you can actually say, well, you know, I want to keep it looking good. But then the engineer side of you can be like, well, let's shave it off. So what we're going to do is come over here And then let's just give this a blue. Now, an easy way to see what's going on, just to see, you know, is the more nodes, usually when it comes to fabrication, the more nodes that are right next to each other, those are more pitfall. So nodes right next to each other indicate something detailed, some kind of thing that probably will get rounded out with a bit anyway, with a router bit. So right off the bat, you can kind of see the trouble parts when your nodes are right next to each other. So like what I would do here, because there's no way that Trimcap is gonna like fill that. Plus I would say he's probably using a 5/32 bit, but on acrylic, Jose might be using a 3/16. I'm not sure, but you can see already like that's just gonna be a bump. And then with your trim cap, usually your trim cap on the face is an 1/8 inch. So if we just throw an 1/8 inch on this, you can see already like, you know, that doesn't exist. That's not going to happen. It's just going to be doughy, and all this right here, that's not going to happen. So we need to kind of smooth all that over and figure that out. So sure. So all I got to do is, if you want to use one of my macros, is take a line. And then what I do is I just take it and draw it so you get this angle, so you don't have to go find that angle. Then what you want to do is put that line to where it's not touching. It's only crossing where you want a node. And then if you go to go time, there's a KK. That's crisscross. What's up? RIP crisscross. RIP a real one. So if you hit the thing you want it to make, you hit the tool first, and then you hit the target object and you hit add node, then it's going to just add a node right there. So you can see it added a node. So now what I'll do is I'll change those to cusp, right? So that way none of them are changing anything. And then whichever one is straight, there you go, there. And then I'll get rid of that. So that is much more trim cap friendly / whatever. And you can see where the nodes have now separated quite a bit. And that's what I call like Duplo blocks versus this is like a Lego block technique, whatever, tiny, making a Formula One model car that actually works or whatever, versus when you're doing trim cap and you're doing acrylic, you want to get rid of stress risers, and you also want to get rid of any kind of, you want to go Duplo. So on this, what I would do is I would just take this and this, right? And then that's a good compromise. So if you just get rid of that, I mean, I know you don't have to make that line, but I'm just trying to show that's like just compromise between the two. And then I would just get rid of that and then just make sure that's on straight. There we go. So that's that. And then these cats here, they're right on the border of, sure, you can get if we did a 3/16 bit, yeah, so it won't let me get a 3/16 bit in there. Let's see if we did a 3/16, where's my circle? There you go. So that's a 3/16 bit cruising around. You can see where it's just going to round that off. Well, so what's the point? So at that point, yeah, I would just do the same thing. I would just throw a line on there real quick, and then I would just put that over here. And then that way I've got that angle. And then again, tools to cross point. There we go. And then just change those to cusp. We can get rid of that. And then whichever one was the straight boy. There we go. So that's going to be more of a, friendly kind of thing. And then I understand like right here, it's starting to get kind of big. Like there's a detail there. But if you throw a outline of an 1/8 on there, you can see where trim cap doesn't do that. Trim cap doesn't go to a point. Trim cap's very doughy. Again, I invite you to go out there and see, take a piece of trim cap and try to flex it, see how much it doesn't want to flex. Oftentimes we use heat guns in order to coax trim cap into corners and things like that. But I'll also tell you how that's not a good thing. I'll show you how that's how that can actually be the enemy, if you will. Oh, that's cusp. There we go. Yeah, see, we don't want to lose that cusp. There we go. All right, so that's looking better. So this will be okay. We can round that out because we'll put a bit on this kind of, but now we kind of go over here and we can double check, and you can see where the nodes aren't like right next to each other. This is more Duplo. This is going to be, we still got one more left over here. This is going to be much more trim cap friendly, but it's also reducing these stress risers that can actually plague us later on. And cusp party. There we go. Let me get rid of that extra node. All right. We good? Everything looking good? Okay. Because I believe sometimes he does use a 3/16 bit. So short of collecting all of these, let's just go ahead and throw a 3/16 bit on all of these insides, right? Just so we know what's going on. I'm going to grab here. I'm going to grab here. We're going to grab there, right? So that's all inside boys or girls, okay? And then I'm going to hit a 3/16 bit. So you can see we already lose that detail anyway, but that gets rid of stress riser because a nice smooth corner like that means that, because to me, I picture them like the little pixies, like the stress runs around trying to find that spot. And once it knows where it can congregate and want to snap that piece, that's where they all run to. So you got to eliminate these things. So that takes care of that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have to round also all of the external stuff. I throw a 16th radius on there just because that sharp corner can actually cut the trim cap. So when you're bringing the trim cap around and you're gluing it and you're nailing it to it to make sure it stays, that sharp corner can actually pierce. And then after a while, you'll have a broken corner, especially after, several years. You're trying to make a nice quality product. So when it comes time to do trim cap, you have to kind of safety everything off and you have to make it go doughy, I call it. You have to make it, Pillsbury Doughboy. Everything's rounded off. Everything's really oozy, makes it look gooey and stuff because everything has to be soft corners. And then now we're going to throw that 1/8 inch on here, right? Now you can see that's very trim cap friendly. And that's what trim cap's going to look like. You lose that definition because trim cap by nature is just roundy and doughy. So it doesn't do any good to have too many sharps, too many, Now the bad part of that, I know it's obvious. We're like, well, that's a weak point. Right. But it could also survive. You could say, well, we could be very careful with it in trim cap. Now, the problem with trim cap is that this doughiness right here, when you bend it like this, sure, we use some heat to try to relax it. You have to use a heat gun, but this doesn't want to bend and it actually ends up being a wedge and you have to literally wedge it in there. You usually have to nail it in there or you have to put something in there to just really shove it in there. Well, much like when you're using a wedge to split wood, that wedge wants to split right here. And guess what? Here's your stress riser. So when you're trying to cram that trim cap into that corner, it'll want to split. So especially right here, I guarantee you, if you weren't watching what you're doing and you had sort of a rookie going on, when it came time to shove that trim cap up into there, you could crack it right there, right where you're making this. And now we're rerouting this because you've cracked it right there. But that stress riser could also show up later. Not only could this be laying on the ground and install's doing the final install, and then homie reaches over to pick it up and he only grabs it on this side, that could just snap. Well, that's sad. But also, this will also be putting up with a lot of expansion. So it depends on how it gets screwed on there. But even in the final state, its end state, it's just chilling. But then it catches that afternoon sun or something. This could cause it to want to grow, but the screws are holding it. So it could still snap then. Now, with signs like this, especially in a busy, sort of parking lot of stuff, most people wouldn't know that crack. They wouldn't notice it at night. But you never know. The property owner might see it. And within 2 months, he's like, why is my sign broken already? It's just a bad look, literally. So looking out for these little things like that before you send the file, that's huge to me. But also, if you're going to be doing what I'm doing, you're going to need to do this anyway. So this is what to look for as far as trim cap, getting things prepped, and getting rid of all these little nuggets that when you're doing the permit drawing, that's perfectly fine. It's fine. Nobody cares. It's like, okay, I get it. It's going to be a thing around it. But all these little hangnails and whatnot, they all need to go, and it all needs to be basically Duplo blocks So it's all safe and gooey and doughy and rounded. So that way the trim cap is happy. And also, like I say, getting rid of those tiny notches, the trim cap wouldn't show up anyway. But as a fabricator, you aren't making these tiny things out of metal. You do, but it's sort of like, this is why, the fabricators will probably TP your house or, let all the air out of tires in your car or something. But anyway, so hope that helps. So keep an eye out for that.